So you've started playing around with liquids in Satisfactory and found perhaps they're not behaving like you intended. Well, in this video we're going to be talking about byproducts and how to use them, and also how to deal with balancing liquids in your factory. This isn't going to go too in depth into the actual flow systems, but hopefully it will show you how to stop your factories seizing up like this, or show you how to deal with your water when it comes to your aluminium setup, as well as some little solutions that will help you if you're still struggling. Anyway, let's get into it. Water is no doubt going to be the first liquid that you have to work with in Satisfactory, and though there are some nuances to using them in the pipes for your cold generator setups, it's oil that... Wait a second, what's all this? Why is it all flooded? Oh dear. So obviously 1.0 has raise the water levels. Anyway, the first time that it's really going to become an issue, I should imagine, is going to be when you reach oil, which you can see here. But before you go to these big setups and you try and set up huge fuel producing plants, we need to understand the basics of how liquids and oil works in Satisfactory, because it brings with it byproducts. So when you set a factory to a particular recipe for crude oil, more likely than not, you will have a main product and a byproduct. Now, if you do not remove the byproduct or use it, what will happen is that this buffer will fill up and eventually shut down, stopping you from being able to produce more resources. This is actually what's happened over in my oil rig here. Now, originally I was exporting the plastic and the rubber, but I stopped needing it, and so I kind of left it to its own device. And despite having a train that comes around to pick it all up, because I don't use any of the plastic and rubber on the train, it backs up. And this is where the issue starts, because our lines back up all the way up to here. And because the output is full, the polymer resin cannot be used up, and this is backing up further down the line. So if we were to remove this, you'll see it starts working fine. This, however, is a problem, because when we go down to the bottom floor, which is producing the polymer resin, you can see that the polymer resin is full, and thus, despite having the crude oil, we're not producing any heavy oil residue. This causes its own issue, because now the fuel refineries aren't receiving any of the heavy oil residue that they need, as you can see here. And as such, all of the buffers have run dry, and so have the generators. But this is why it is super important, if you are going to be running a setup like this, that you need to be dealing with the outputs. So for example, instead of sending all of this to my old base, we could set up an awesome sink. And so we're going to be sinking at first the plastic here. And by sinking this, not only do we get a few coupons and tickets towards that, you'll see that everything will start to turn on in this segment. And this has the knock-on effect of turning everything else on as well, which is a good thing. And now that we're starting to consume that plastic and rubber in the awesome sink, you can see this is starting to come alive. It's super important, and I cannot stress enough, dealing with your byproducts in Satisfactory when it comes to your liquids, because if you don't do that, it's not going to run. But if you're stuck with something like polymer resin and you don't know what to do with it, you can always just pop a awesome sink down, because any solid item like this can be sent to the awesome sink and sunk for coupons, with a few exceptions. If, however, you have a plastic or a rubber factory and you're producing that, but you have the excess heavy oil residue and you're not using alternate recipes, then you need to find a way to use up your oil. And in this circumstance, I'm producing fuel, which is then going to be burnt off in a generator. So the big takeaway from this, first and foremost, is that if you have something that's producing a byproduct, you need to find a way to use up that byproduct. It's not worth just leaving it in a buffer or trying to store it until later if you don't have a fail-safe system up and running, such as an awesome sink, or if you're turning oil into heavy oil residue and then turning that into fuel so that it can be burnt off. There are also other production chains that don't require oil but do use other liquids, so we'll talk about them next, such as for aluminium and alumina solution. So let's head over to my setup. It's only a small one, but it should give you an idea as to how I'm running it. Okay, so we are at my aluminium or aluminum plant, and the first thing that we can point out is if we go over here, we have our alumina solution, and this is consuming 180 water per minute and outputting 120 alumina solution. And this is actually doubled up. We have a second one over here with the exact same recipe. So we have 360 water being consumed in this setup. And then up here we have my aluminum or alumina solution to aluminium or aluminum scrap. Now the problem with this, which most people have trouble with, is that it is outputting 120 water as a byproduct. And often people can't seem to balance this. Now, having seen this setup in action, we are going to now set this up, and I'm going to show you how I've done this layout at a little testbed area, just so that you can see what's happening. I should also mention that despite my factory requires 360 water per minute, ooh, this has changed, that we're only bringing it 240 water, and that's because we had the 120 output from the third refinery. But let me show you how I balanced that all out. And here we are with our little test setup here. So we're going to be running the same situation. We've got two alumina solution refineries. They're taking 240 bauxite per minute between them and need 360 water. And we have our aluminum scrap refinery here, which requires 240 alumina solution, which is the exact ratio from these two's output. And then we have the water, which is going to be recycled back into the system back here. So we're looping it back in. And then we also have both of our outputs, our solid outputs for the silica and the scrap, going to an awesome sink, just so that we can make sure that that's not going to be an issue for us. Now you could try and flush the pipes if you want before doing this. I recommend just leaving it, to be honest. And we are going to make sure that our refineries are primed so they are full with water. And then we're going to add our bauxite to the system. And immediately everything should start turning on, as you can see here. And as the alumina solution is produced, it's going to head over to the scrap refinery here. Now the concern for a lot of people is that the water is going to back up, and it shouldn't do that. You should see as soon as this fills, it is flushed out of the system and back into the network, because we're only producing 240 water here and we need 360. And it's been a couple of minutes and I am pretty confident that this isn't going to fail now. But if you are having an issue, there is another way in which we can resolve this. So I'm just going to very quickly set up a third extractor, and we're going to add our water here. So this system is now receiving 360 water per minute, the exact amount that they need, and we are left with a aluminum scrap refinery that is filling up with water. So to deal with this situation, we've brought the water to another refinery. We're going to connect it up. I'm also going to grab some more resources in a moment. But from here, we have different recipes that take on water. So we have the iron or pure iron ingot alternate recipe, and combining water with iron, we can produce more iron ingots. And this is great because we can then sink the solid item that it's producing. In this case, the water isn't going to be going fast enough. We need 120 water to be removed from the system per minute. Again, we have 10 water here with this one. That's slightly better with pure Caterium ingots, but where it really comes into its own is with wet concrete. Now this takes 100 water per minute and combines it with 120 limestone to produce 80 concrete. Now you can, if you want, increase this with a power shard or even double the system up so that it's going to consume 120 water per minute. And then if we connect it with our limestone, we can add a sink on the other end and you'll notice that this is going to start taking all of that water and produce concrete, which we're immediately sinking, and that should remove the backlog here, as you can see, allowing this system to run without any issues. Now, if you are wondering how to get the wet concrete, you will have to search hard drives for that. It can be unlocked as soon as you unlock water extractors. But guys, we are going to leave it there. If you would like some more tips on how to unlock recipes quickly in the early game using the MAM, then do check out my early game alternate recipes for 1.0 guide. I'll put a link to that now. But guys, special thanks does go to all of our amazing supporters on Patreon, most notably our Lunar Eclipse patrons Firefless the Calamity, Ben and Star, and our Blood Moon of the day, which today is Irate Monk. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.